I forgot what sound a chocobo made when I was talking to Amanda a few days ago, so I don't know why I just said chocobo. Like a chocobo was a Pokemon.
Oh, jeez.
Isn't it quay or walk, work?
It depends on the game.
Depends on the swear word.
Yeah, that's true.
If I could keep that straight, I would honestly be tempted to put in a different generation of chocobo sound for each swear word if I could keep it straight. Gets a different one than gets a different one, like depending on how bad the swear word is, we just go up in generations.
Hello and welcome to episode 80 of Rhythm Encounter, the RPG fan music podcast. I'm your host, Mike Salbato, and as you can probably tell, today we're talking about the Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters. So if you've been listening to past episodes, you know we've been promising and trying to do this one for several months. We pushed it back a little bit because Final Fantasy VI came out later than expected, but now that all six are out, we finally got to sit down and put together a show about this music, and I think you are going to like it. So joining me today to talk about Final Fantasy Remastered music, we have three people. So first is Random Encounter host Jono Logan.
I don't think we should do this episode until they're all released on Switch, personally.
All right.
Solidarity with Switch.
That was a short podcast. Yeah, all right. This could be our April Fool's show.
Oh, all
right.
Oh, no.
See you later, everyone.
Oh, I think we have something a little better than that for the April Fool's episode.
Also joining us today is Features Manager Zach Wilkerson.
Hello.
And Audra Bowling from Reviews.
Hello.
Very happy to have all of you here. Some of you have recently even reviewed some of these Pixel Remasters, so I think you're all going to have a lot of good commentary here. Let's just a quick little introduction. Let's talk about which of these games each of us are familiar with, just for fun. I'm happy that we are going to represent all 6 games today, which is awesome. Jono, let's put you on the spot.
Okay, yeah, sure. I have played all of these games. The only one I have not completed is Final Fantasy III, and I've been meaning to do the Pixel Remaster. The only reason I haven't played Final Fantasy III is because I don't know, I didn't like the fan translation of the NES version, and the DS remake just never seemed to, I never vibed with it properly. It never really clicked with me. But I'm super excited to play that one. But otherwise, I played Final Fantasy, the original, probably 4 or 5 times. 2, I played once using the fan translation for NES. 4, I have no idea how many times I've completed it. 5, I recently completed it again for the Retro Encounter episodes. And 6, again, I have no idea how many times I've played it, but many, many, many.
Well, that's impressive.
Not really. It's just being an RPG fan, Mike.
No, don't. Oh, boy. I can't go after that.
Throwing fire.
I know. All right, fine. You know what? I'll do mine just to get it out of the way. But, unfortunately, the very early Final Fantasy games are my weak spot in the series because I have played and finished nearly all of them from 6 on and 4. But I wasn't playing them back on the NES, so I have not finished 1 through 3. And
also, they were never available.
Well, 1 was. 1 came out here.
1 came out here, yes.
And then I also have the DS version of 3, but didn't really get very far, do much with it. And then 5 I had on the PlayStation, but I played through, I'm pretty sure I finished 6 on the PlayStation, but I just never got to 5, and I think I couldn't deal with the load times and speed of that.
Understandable.
But I put up with it for 6. So yeah, I am at least playing through the Pixel Remaster of 1 now, and I'm trying to do them in order. So my plan is to have all of them, finally finished soon. So Audra, I know some of these are new to you.
Yes, I played the Pixel Remaster of 2 and 5 and 6, actually. So my exposure to them has been pretty recent. I played the PSP version of Final Fantasy 1 and the DS versions of 3 and 4. So I've played a version of each game at least once.
And good versions, too.
But the Pixel Remasters were some of my first playthroughs, so.
I mean, from what I've played and seen of them, I think that's a great place to start, though.
Oh, they're definitely very definitive versions, I think. Mm-hmm. Especially of 2.
Oh, I bet. What about you, Zach?
Well, 2 is the only one I haven't played to completion. Otherwise, my story is pretty similar to Jono's. I did play Pixel Remaster 3 for review, and I liked it a lot. 4, I played some RPGs before 4, but it's the first one that is like crystal clear in my memory, remembering like the art, watching my grandparents play it. 5, I played on the PlayStation. 6, I've played a bunch of times. 4, 1. So yeah, I mean, like I'm familiar with a lot of them, but 2, I couldn't handle it. I couldn't hang.
It makes sense.
Yeah, I couldn't hang with the fan translation version of that, and eventually I'll probably not play it. So yeah. Otherwise, that's my experience with the early versions.
That was a good plot twist in the middle of that. Eventually, I will not play it. It really has no bearing on today, but the one I think I would struggle to say has a definitive version for me anyway, it might be 4, because 4 has been remade so many times. I have
that's
true. That PSP version.
I have very strong feelings about that PSP one. I was always upset that none of the other games in the series got that treatment.
At least strong feelings about half of the PSP version.
No, I mean,
well, sure.
Final Fantasy IV on PSP. You're making it sound like there's a collection with like a second game or something, but it was just for the original.
I've never heard of that.
I'm not really going to trash talk the After Years, having not played them, but I've heard enough that I don't think I want to.
You don't.
You should just play Final Fantasy IV again.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a better choice.
I did get it on sale once, so
there is like a one semi-okay storyline that is mostly just aping a storyline from Final Fantasy IV. So
in the random episode, we realized that Final Fantasy: The After Years has Golbez in a kilt, and that's the only reason to play that game.
That's a good reason, honestly. That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know until Alana brought that. It was Alana, right? Alana brought that up, and I looked up the artwork for Golbez in the After Years, and I was like, "Oh, wow! I didn't know that was a thing." So,
with his Pantene Provine hair.
I like the idea that all the Lunarians have Scottish accents now. Mm-hmm. Puts an interesting light on François stuff.
No kidding.
So the moon is just Scotland.
Having lived there, it feels like it sometimes. Yeah,
I think they might like to be.
Okay, well, today we're going to talk a little bit about all 6. Unsurprisingly, 3 of our 8 tracks ended up being from Final Fantasy VI. But, I think we pretty much knew that was going to happen, given that we didn't want to do this show without 6 being released. The funny thing is, too, I had this whole introduction planned and how we were going to discuss it and like how you can get these games now, but there's been no word about the soundtrack or if they're going to release the soundtracks. And of course, the day before we record this, Square finally released the soundtracks in a weird manner. I don't know what it's going to be like when this episode goes up, but right now you can stream them on they have a Japanese website set up for it, and it's all free. You can buy them through a Japanese online store. And I think you can buy them through iTunes, although linking to the albums doesn't always work. And they don't stream properly on Apple Music. I assume all of this will be fixed by the time this airs, but if not, there are some options. We have a story up so you can listen to these like officially in full, but hopefully it gets cleared up because right now it's kind of tricky.
It's a journey.
It is. Let's see what happens if I click this. Nothing. It sounds like playing Final Fantasy 2.
It's still not working. So either the Pixel remasters are not available for streaming in Canada or it's still not up.
I know. It's just weird. Like for me, it opens up in Apple Music, but you can't play them. And if I search through iTunes, I can view them. I haven't tried buying them. There's a price and theoretically I can buy them, but maybe it doesn't work yet. It's just there to taunt you. So hopefully it works itself out. And after people listen to this, they will be able to go and listen in some other capacity as well. So I say we get started here.
Cool.
So I'm starting off this episode with a pick from the first Final Fantasy. It's our only Final Fantasy 1 song on here. And I brought on the arrangement of Chaos Shrine from Final Fantasy. And then after that, Jono has a song from 4.
Yes, I'm going to be doing the overworld theme from Final Fantasy IV.
That is a classic. Well, I guess they're all classics, aren't they?
Yeah.
So, all right. Let's go listen to Chaos Shrine and main theme of Final Fantasy IV. I thought given the recent release of Stranger of Paradise, it would really just be wrong not to start this off with some chaos.
A little chaos.
Yep.
One must kill chaos.
Exactly. But seriously, it's really just because, I listened to several songs on the Final Fantasy 1 soundtrack, or this version of Final Fantasy 1 soundtrack. And I'm always drawn to Matoya's Cave because it is one of those classic, iconic songs, and it has appeared in other games like 14. Unfortunately, it's also one of the only Final Fantasy 1 songs we've had on the show, maybe more than once. So I definitely put that off the table. I think my next favorite song in the first game was definitely the Chaos Shrine, and the arrangement in this one is just gorgeous. I'm sure we'll talk about it more as we go on with this show, but the arrangements for the whole series, I think they get a little bit lighter each time, because especially by the time you get to 6, there's not as much they need to do because the tracks they just had more tools at their disposal back then. But when you listen to the arrangements, especially from the first 3, they're so different from the original because they're doing things that they just could not do in the 80s and early 90s with the hardware. And the Chaos Shrine especially is just, I love the instrumentation and how they put it all together, and the strings in here. For me, that's really what sells it. It adds this air of mystery. If you played, I'm sure, several versions of Final Fantasy 1, but if you played the Pixel Remaster, just the vibe in there when you walk in, it's misty and mysterious. I think the way they did the instrumentation on this really fits the feel of the Chaos Shrine, at least when you first encounter it early on in the game.
I mean, I think what's interesting about it is it doesn't sound like a dungeon theme to me. And the way that they play around with it, I think it works pretty well. And so I like the sort of this rushing water sound that's swelling and receding as you're walking through it. And the really simple melody of the piano, it kind of gives you, as you said, that notion of mystery, but it also, I don't know if it's because it's early or not, but it feels a lot calmer than I would expect from a Final Dungeon track, which I think is really interesting. I'm not really sure that I can attribute it to anything except for the fact that I like that it's different. And I feel sort of the way that the timpani builds up towards the end of it, but it never totally resolves, I think is really interesting too, in a way that kind of maybe makes some sense with the storyline of Final Fantasy 1. But yeah, I think it's really cool.
I agree. I mean, yeah, with the orchestration of this version of the orchestration really gives a mysterious feel. It's I can almost see mist in the shrine kind of thing. Something that I found interesting that I was doing when I was doing my prep for this episode was listening to the original and then going back and listening to the Pixel Remaster version, and ask myself, okay, what does this song do in the original? What does this song do in the Pixel Remaster? And how well does the feel of the remaster sort of match up with that? And I think the original MIDI of this section, it's always been a fade because it appears so early in the game, so late in the game. It's super short. The loop is super short, but gets the point across with very little actual music. It's very short. And yeah, I think that one of the strengths about, actually, you know what? I'm going to say this right now because this is true for every single song that we're going to be talking about, which is in the original NES games, and to a lesser extent the SNES games, all the MIDI songs were just loops. That's what they were. They were designed to be loops. So whether or not that loop was 30 seconds for a lot of the NES games or a minute and a half for the Super Nintendo games, that's what you get. But something I love with all of the Pixel Remaster versions is that they don't just loop. The second time around, they usually pick different orchestrations. They pick different instrumentations and give you a different color to the song. So it takes you on a journey rather than just repeats over and over again. And this song does that very, very well. The strings that come in the second time around adds a real nice texture to the overall song. And I think that the quality that the song originally had and the feel it gave you of exploring this destroyed shrine is only deepened by this arrangement of it. And I think that they really did a great job with it. And
I think that, I think that we've kind of talked around it, and I'm not going to talk any more directly about it, but the way that this one in particular changes from that sort of simple piano to strings, xylophone, horns, and the way that those three are interplaying, like hints at some things that you wouldn't be aware of. And I like, and I agree with you. Like one of the things that I think is really interesting is the way they extend it. And one of the things I was trying to think about is like what changes in those extensions. And I feel like they added more instruments this time. And it got a little more intense in that second half in this version. And I think that makes sense in the context of this game.
I just think it's an awesome arrangement.
Oh, it is. I mean, that's a blanket statement that I suspect we're going to be saying about every track in this. It's genuinely, I think I said this when we were talking about the Final Fantasy V episode, but yeah, redoing all the graphics and making them the pixel perfect, but they're not. They kind of look like we remember them. But similarly, these sound like we remember them. Almost.
Yes.
If we haven't heard them countless times in the past. The amount of effort that Square Enix put into just doing these incredible soundtracks for the Pixel remasters is jaw-dropping. They easily could have gotten away with doing like modern day MIDI and stuff like that, but they didn't. They went all out for it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think that, and we'll talk about this too, like knowing that there are like multiple versions of lots of these songs, hearing how they've interpreted something like, I don't know, we'll talk about a dungeon that comes up again in Final Fantasy XIV later. The way that they managed to like adjust the way that sound has come out, like it's actually a little more stripped down than some other versions, I think is really cool too. Like it feels true to the spirit of the original in ways that I think is really cool.
I think it highlights the game's atmosphere more.
Yeah, that's a good... I realize we're talking about just everything now instead of just Chaos Shrine, but that is a good point, Zach. I like that we've heard so many of these songs arranged in countless ways over the years, and they really could have gone overboard with it, but they actually, held back a little bit to kind of keep the spirit of the original, and I appreciate that. Kind of like they did with the main theme of Final Fantasy IV.
That's a good one. Very nicely done.
Thank you.
Yeah. Final Fantasy IV was my first RPG. It's the first time I played through the whole thing. I've talked about it a lot on the podcast, so I don't really need to do it here. But because it was my first RPG, realistically, this is my first overworld theme. And because of that, I have a tremendous amount of nostalgia attached to it. So to separate my nostalgia from the song is tricky, but I think I've done it. I adore what they did with this version because, again, I didn't even need to listen to the original. In this case, I just know what it sounds like. But I went back to another version of it, which is the DS version, because there was a full polygon remake of Final Fantasy IV, and with new music and very similar to what they did with the Pixel remasters. They just did like orchestral versions of the entire soundtrack. However, the version on the DS is a very conservative orchestration of this song. It's lovely, and it's extremely true to the original version. But this version in the Pixel remasters does several different things that really brings this song to life for me. First off, like the build is there at the very beginning, and it's the same. It feels very much the same as the beginning. It's a really nice build that brings you into this world. But in this version, there's like a wind sound effect in the background, and the wind sound effect is in various places throughout the track. And for me, it almost makes it feel like you're taking in an entire vista, like the whole world is in front of you, and you're taking it in, and it's a living world. The percussion in this version of the song, it drives the song forward in the exact same way it did in the original, but the different instrumentation throughout it creates dynamics that this is going to sound a little weird for me because I'm associating this with the whole world and the outside. It almost feels like for me like weather systems, like different instruments give a slightly different feel to how the outdoor is. And because of that, it's like rainy or it's beautiful or it's stormy. And I really, really like that. So the different, like when the strings are playing the melody, it feels one way. When the horns are doing it, it's another. When the woodwinds are, it's another. And I really like that. The song for me, whenever I just hear this, I know that I'm ready to, it's what I associate with an overworld. And because I think it's my favorite overworld theme. I mean, I know it's my first, but I also think it's my favorite, partially because of nostalgia, but partially because they just nailed it. Their first attempt on the SNES for an overworld theme, they got it.
Yeah, I mean, my feelings are pretty similar to yours. I mean, like, again, this wasn't my first RPG like you, but it is like the first one that I remember really vividly. And everything has been compared to it since. I think about, like, the first OST I ever bought was Final Fantasy IV. And in some ways, I prefer it to the one that we all know is probably better. It's delightful. And the thing that struck me this time is the way that it seems like the flute and the harp and all the things that are kind of coming together almost make it feel like a little dreamlike to me. And I think that kind of getting to that notion of fantasy and that notion of like you're in a different space and that notion of mystery. Because I remember as a kid when I was playing this, like and again, like playing it now, I'm like, of course I know it's around every corner, but and I think I would even still, but if I hadn't played it before, but like it feels so otherworldly and in like a very subtle way, and in a way that I think makes the drive of the rest of the track like move you forward towards like the mystery of what's out there and like the dreamlike nature of what's out there. And I think that the way they use the harp in particular here ended up making that work really well. And I agree in terms of the way they were changing to different elements or different instrumentation was just fantastic.
I like that perspective. I like the idea of it being dreamlike and otherworldly, which really fits with an RPG in general, but especially with where this game goes in its story. I think that really works. Maybe that's what drew me to it too.
Yeah, Zach, what you said about fantasy. It's a really, really great fantasy theme.
Yep.
Yeah, it brings to mind like a sweeping story that's just going to take you away. I think that it really captures that emotion.
Yeah, it does.
And given that everything up to now like totally aped Miyazaki or Joe Hisaishi more accurately, it doesn't feel like a Ghibli track to me as much either. And I think that kind of distinguishes it in really interesting ways too. And like you can see Uematsu like sort of stretching his legs into an overworld theme, whereas the other three, as much as I adore Eternal Wind and wanted to bring it if it wasn't 4 episodes ago, feels like it would be right at home in Castle in the Sky. This feels unique to Final Fantasy back then and now.
It doesn't just feel unique to Final Fantasy for me, it feels unique to Final Fantasy IV. This occurred to me, and I'm trying to think about the 3 different overworld themes for Final Fantasy 4, 5, and 6. I guess Final Fantasy 6 has a few different overworld themes, but just the main one. If you were to change them out, if you were to put them in other games, they really, really wouldn't fit. It's fascinating how overworld themes have a certain feel that we recognize. We listen to it and it feels like, oh, this is the overworld, but it's very specific to the game. Like, if you put this overworld theme into Final Fantasy V, it wouldn't fit at all, because Final Fantasy V is like infused with the spirit of adventure.
Mm-hmm. It would be very out of place.
Yeah, and this has a much more melancholy feel to it, without being sad. Just a little bit of melancholy. Yeah.
Which kind of fits for FF4.
Yeah, it does. Going off to... we're not going to kill Chaos, we're going to kill a little girl's mother.
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
Spoilers.
See, I really wanted to talk about like the dreamlike nature of it and how peaceful it is and all that, but like that's just out the window now, you know? I was really thinking about how I would like a sleep story, like in one of those apps based on this song. But now I don't. So
moral of the story is, kids, if someone tells you to deliver a bomb ring, say no.
Yes. Oh, I'm sure this isn't going to hurt anyone. Oh boy. I have unfortunately not a whole lot of original thoughts to add here because my introduction to RPGs was almost exactly the same as Zach. Like, we have the same origin story because I played Dragon Quest and it was however far I got when I was 6. I have no idea, probably not that far, but this was the game that got me into RPGs, so I have the same level of nostalgia and all that. But one thing I do like, Jono, you talked about this a little bit about the different instruments that come in, but I specifically like the way all of the instruments are layered together in this song, because that's something that they couldn't really do. Like, I guess they could do it a little bit with the Super Nintendo, but not to this degree. They didn't have that level, but I really like listening to this one again. Today or whenever, but I listened today and I was really honing in on that, like how you can hear the different instruments at different parts and how everything is like layered together and weaves together. It's just fantastic.
The interplay between the instruments. Yeah.
And I have to agree with the DS comment about that. It almost seems like it held back in a way compared to this version, which I feel like this one's maybe the more powerful of the two.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I guess people in my particular social group tend to think about the word, like, I'm the word conservative as a negative, but I'm not using it in a negative sense here. Like the DS version, the entire DS soundtrack is a very conservative arrangement of the Final Fantasy IV soundtrack. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's very conservative as compared to all of the Pixel remasters. So I would argue there is nothing conservative about any track in the entire Pixel Remaster collection.
No, they pretty much went all out with trying to, I think, convey emotion through them.
Yeah, I think they really asked themselves the question, okay, what does this song do? What purpose does this song serve in the story? And let's lean into that with the new orchestration. And I think that for the most part, they just nailed it.
I would agree.
Mike, something that you said that resonated with me, I think it was because I listened to all of the MIDI versions before I listened to these versions. You were talking about the interplay of the instruments, and I was paying really close attention, much more than I usually did, listening to the MIDI versions. And the layering is there. Like, if you're really paying attention to it, you can hear how the various MIDI instruments play off each other. But the problem is that because MIDI is so limited with the sounds it can create, it really does sort of blur into each other. So even relative complexity is muted because a MIDI instrument, a MIDI horn and a MIDI string, yeah, they sound different, but when you put them side by side, it's much more difficult to hear the difference. Whereas if you put actual horns and actual strings next to each other, yeah, you know exactly which one is which. And because of that, it just deepens, even if they did a conservative arrangement, just having real instruments instantly deepens the feel of every song.
It always makes me wonder when Uematsu was arranging this, like how he was thinking about like the MIDI sound. You know what I mean? Like, because like there are times when I'm listening and there's one track in particular that I wasn't super crazy about, but and I wonder if like the reason I wasn't crazy about it was because like the sound that he was creating in the MIDI version, like it doesn't match up to like the instrument that I associated with it in some cases. And I wonder how much he was thinking about that and how much input he had into these. I know he was involved in the rearrangements, but he didn't actually do them. I don't know. I just find the whole thing fascinating.
I wonder what it was like for him, having been limited by the NES sound, to all of a sudden have access to the SNES sound card. And like all of a sudden having all of these new instruments open up. Like the difference between the original NES and the Super Nintendo in terms of sound is very similar to, I guess, the difference between the Super Nintendo and these versions with full orchestrations. Like having all of those new tools available to you, it must have been incredible.
Speaking of new tools that are incredible.
Yes. As in tools you can use around your home, for example? Okay. All right. We had to tag team that one. We had to tag team it, but we got it. All right. So our next block here. Audra, tell us about your song.
My song is Home Sweet Home from Final Fantasy V.
Awesome. And then Zach, this is also your first song of the episode.
My first pick is Celes or Celes's theme from Final Fantasy VI.
Oh, really? Because I was really convinced as a young, stupid kid that her name was Celes. So if you want to go
that part
with,
did not occur to me.
If you want to go with that, well, yeah, I know, but you're also talking to someone that played Mystic Quest with his brother and really had never seen the name Phoebe typed out. So we had some interesting ideas about that one too.
Phoebe.
She was Phoebe. Okay.
Everyone's favorite friend character, Phoebe.
I know, Phoebe. Oh, I shouldn't be admitting this. We're going to cut all that out, right?
Absolutely not.
All right, let's go. Let's go listen to Home Sweet Home and Celes's theme.
Well, since with the Pixel Remaster, it was my first time playing FF5. I hadn't really heard Home Sweet Home before in the original version. I'd actually heard a vocal track from Dear Friends, I think album.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always loved that vocal track version of it, so I really wanted to hear the Pixel Remaster version of the song. And it really it captures so much emotion and sentimentality and just the feeling of returning home, but things being different. It's a beautiful song, and I think it has a very music box quality to it.
I love that you said music box.
Yeah.
Because having listened to all the Pixel Remaster soundtracks, it's not common that they try to synthesize like a harpsichord, but they totally do here. I think that part of it gives that, because harpsichord is something that's really common in pre-classical music, and it gives it that feeling of being home. It feels like almost like a child is playing the piano, like in the way that it's a little sharp, and it's a little tinny, that little bit of Gaelic, and I love that it almost feels like a waltz, and for me, it just gave it such like a homey feel, and it to me, of the 8 tracks we have today, it feels the most distinct, just because of the way that it's playing with sound in ways that are just a little bit different from a lot of the other stuff, like where everything else is really like flute and percussion driven. Like the music drives it here in the way that it would a waltz, and this almost like strange, I'm really bad at time, but I think it's like 3/4 time, and it makes it feel like really unique and homey, and as a person who doesn't remember Final Fantasy V, I hope that makes sense, but that was what I was getting from it.
To me, it just captures, the title's apt. It just captures a sense of home and sweet memories.
I like that you were mainly introduced to this through the Dear Friends album, because so was I. I don't know when I first heard that. It's been a long time now, but it was long enough ago, and I've heard it enough that I can't actually hear any version of the song anymore without, picturing the vocals in my head.
The vocals.
Yeah. It's a great arrangement. Not that we're talking about that one here today, but I do like that it's a song that really lends itself well to all these different versions they've had over the years. But the music box quality of this particular one is really nice. I agree.
More so than any other track in this episode, I feel like this one is the most, true to the original. I love what this does, and I love how it deepens it, but it feels very, very similar to the original MIDI version. And then it goes into a few different places with the orchestration, with the strings and stuff. Why I love this song is it's a very simple melody, and yet it communicates a ton of story. It feels like, it's like you said, it feels like a hometown. It feels like something you'd hear at like a small town festival. And that's really great, because that's important in a game where there isn't a ton of story. Again, not hitting Final Fantasy V for that, but it isn't. A lot of Final Fantasy V is told in tone rather than story. And something specifically that I really like about this track, paradoxically, is the town of Lix, where this song is played. It's Bartz's hometown. And it's actually super easy to miss. Like, if you're not going crazy once you get the Black Chocobo, because you need to land, unless I'm mistaken, you need to land the Black Chocobo near Lix in order to get there. You might not even see the town, and therefore you might actually miss this song completely.
Oh yeah, I almost missed it, actually.
Yeah, that unfortunately also misses out on the bare bones character development that Bartz gets in the game when you land in this town. It's funny, it's great, but the town serves literally no narrative purpose in the game aside from slightly deepening Bartz's character. Nothing happens in the town. The town gets fridged in the third half of the game, so as motivation for Bartz. But this song, it's strange to me that such an iconic song that many people recognize can just be missed, because I don't think it's anywhere else in the game.
No, I think it's just there. Totally missable if you...
I would not have guessed that this song's missable. Having not played the game, but knowing how important this one is, at least my perception has been that it's a really key song for Final Fantasy V. I had no idea that was the context for it.
I would argue it's a key song for one of the characters in Final Fantasy V, but because character development is so put on the back burner in Final Fantasy V, it's missable. So, yeah.
It's kind of fitting in a way.
When you play it, make sure you take your black chocobo out for some exercise. And just land in all the forests where you might see some houses.
That's good advice. Thank you. I don't have a segue between any of that and Zach's song. So, Zach, this is on you.
They're pretty different. So, yeah.
Character development. You know who has lots of character development?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
Locke.
Celeste. You know, his is also missable. Celeste's is less missable.
Yeah.
Yeah. This track has always been phenomenal. The MIDI version, I haven't heard any other versions. It doesn't matter. It's Celeste's theme. It's so good. It's just so... It captures a level of like mystery and mournfulness that very few tracks in video games do. And I love the way this track deals with some of those things, and the way that it gives, I think, like different emotions to like the different complexities of how Celeste is feeling at one particular moment at the beginning of the second half of the game, we'll say. So it's not to spoil anything for those who haven't played. Also, go play Final Fantasy VI, please.
Yes.
But the way that, like, I feel like the violins in particular, like, carry the sadness of this song in really, really strong ways. And then, like, the horns almost have, like, the tiniest bit, like, of the background hope that she might potentially feel in that moment as well, depending on how you get to that moment. But it's just lovely. And, like, the way the flute is almost, like, searching. It feels like a searching sound, like, where she's trying to find something. And, like, all those things combine together to get to who Celeste is as a person in this moment of absolute despair. In this game, I think it's phenomenal.
I agree. To put it succinctly,
I think in a game full of astonishing character themes that this one really does stand out. And what's kind of interesting about it, unless I miss casting my mind back, I don't think we hear this character theme until well into the first half of the game, after the opera. I think the first time we hear it, I think we hear it first time in just before the boat leaves Albrook, heading to the Crescent Island. So it's really held back. So you hear the opera way before you hear this theme. What's kind of interesting to me is that, it's obviously, it's an instrumental version of her aria from the opera. But despite the fact that Celes sings that crap out of this song of the opera, the lyrics of the opera have nothing to do with her overall storyline. Like, she isn't looking for a lost love, and yeah, there are some romantic overtures with Locke, but it's not really developed in the game. It has nothing to do with who she is as a person. Like, I feel her overall storyline is, like you said, Zach, it's a search. I think she's looking for family and a past, and a new purpose. After she betrays the Empire, I think she is looking for a purpose in the world. And the aria is about her. Like, I'm most familiar with the Super Nintendo lyrics, but like, she's singing, "I'm the darkness, you're the stars." Like, it's pretty traditional, kind of old style aria sort of thing, and that's not who Celes is. So it's interesting to me that the music for me fits her perfectly, but the words to the music, which there are, don't at all.
That's a good point. Yeah, I had forgotten actually that you hear it as the opera before you hear it as her character theme. So it's kind of interesting that it became her character theme, given how the words they fit Maria, not her. I like the way the instruments are used in this one. I listened to the original, like, just to compare a little bit. Not that I haven't heard it 1,000 times, but there's like this kind of like delicate feeling to the instruments that they chose for this one, and I like it. I think it works well with what Zach said, like the parts of the song that have like kind of a more fragile feel. I think that's emphasized a little bit with the way this one was arranged. I think that works really well because of that. So I appreciate that.
There are certain arrangements from the Pixel remasters that that have made less of an impact on me. And it's not because they're not gorgeous or brilliant interpretations of these songs. It's because I've heard orchestral reinterpretation of these songs before. Like, I've heard many versions of Celes' theme and the aria. And I think this is a particularly good one, but it's not like a lot of songs from like Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, where I've never heard orchestrations like this before.
See, that it was more my first time hearing it, so it really...
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the MIDI version?
No, I haven't. I need to.
You should give it a listen. It's very, very interesting. I would be very interested to see what your reaction was going backwards from these versions to the originals, and see how you react to those.
I mean, I do feel like this version is, at least with Celes' theme, is pretty faithful to what
It's
the
very
original
true
is
to the
doing.
original. Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty powerful for a MIDI theme as well.
Well, I think it goes back a little bit to what we said earlier on, where they didn't have to do as much with the later games. So I understand I agree with you, actually, Jono, is that like this one didn't like hit me or surprise me when I heard it. It wasn't like, oh wow, like this is completely different, because it isn't. It's an updated take on it, but it didn't need to be completely different. Like it didn't need that level of change or anything that would just like knock you off your feet, because it was already so good.
I mean, that being said about the aria, it's funny. Anyone who has listened to Grand Finale, Final Fantasy VI Grand Finale, has heard like a extraordinarily good version of the opera sung through. So how do you up the ante? Well, you record like 9 different versions of it in every frigging language you can think of. So yeah, the aria blew me away. Like the versions of the aria in the Pixel Remaster just shocked me, because wow.
Yeah, it really gave some more context to that. This is coming out 3 months later than you thought it would, but here's why.
Yeah, and I feel like given the quality of that scene, I remember thinking, oh, I kind of wish this came out a year later than it was supposed to, so we could get the whole game in this.
That would have been pretty
good.
Maybe one day. They keep doing more and more with that HD 2D style, so I would be shocked if they would do it for Dragon Quest 3. I don't know why exactly 3, but and not apply it to
the most popular one in Japan.
Okay, all right. But like, I feel like if they're going to do it with Dragon Quest, at some point they're going to have to do it with some Final Fantasy game.
My money says it's going to be Chrono Trigger.
I agree.
I would love that.
Yes, it would be awesome.
If they announced Chrono Trigger 2D HD at E3 this year, I think we could hear each other screaming.
I hope
through
they
the
don't,
internet.
because I might not be alive anymore. I'll be so excited.
Okay, I was like, wow, I know things are tough right now, Zach, but like, even though I'm not that pessimistic.
Yeah, I appreciate your optimism, Jono. I appreciate that you still think E3 is relevant. That's very sweet.
I'm using E3 as a catch-all. At this point, I think E3 has evolved into however many conferences are shoved into a 2-week period.
That's true. Hey, I'm just going to call it sometime this summer. Anyway, I don't have a segue for Crystal Tower. Zach, tell us about
Speaking
Crystal
of
Tower.
things that are done a lot. So far it's the opposite. Wait, that's bad. Anyway, so I brought the Crystal Tower from Final Fantasy III.
I like that you've had both these songs on, and not once have you introduced either one as an obvious pick. Because I know sometimes you think that you're picking obvious things.
You know, my original thought was Terra's theme, but it's already been on the show before. So, and also Eternal Wind, which has also been on the show in the last 4 weeks, or the last 4 episodes. So, you know, these were my alternative picks, which are still pretty obvious. So thank you for reminding me.
I don't know about that. Arguably, Celes' theme is obvious, but Crystal Tower, I don't think that's obvious. I think it's awesome. I don't think
Obviously, you don't play Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, that's true.
So, no, but you know what? You say obvious, I say important and essential. So
that's fair. That's fair.
After Crystal Tower is my second song, and we're going back to Final Fantasy VI again, with Searching for Friends, which is a song fairly late in the game, depending on how you play it. But so let's go listen to Crystal Tower and Searching for Friends.
So it is shocking to me that I chose the theme for the Crystal Tower, because I've heard a version of this so many times that it almost makes me a little bit ill to hear the real version of it. When I say real, I mean the version from Final Fantasy 14. And because anyone who plays 14 knows that Alliance Raid Roulette really just means Circus Tower Roulette. So I've heard a version of the song very, very, very many times, but I actually... playing this game, first of all, one thing that struck me a lot was just how much Final Fantasy XIV pulls from it, but also how distinct the original version is, and also the version of this soundtrack is from the versions that I've heard elsewhere, because I played the 3DS version almost to the end, and I'd heard the soundtrack a bunch of times, and I've also heard the 14 version a bunch of times. And I guess to me, what struck me the most as I was listening to these was the contrast with the other tracks that I have heard, particularly the 3DS, or this, it was actually DS, in the 14 version. Because like the DS version of Final Fantasy 3 like uses a ton of vocals, and it feels like kind of soaring and kind of triumphant in its own way. And the 14 version feels like, and this is not common for a 14 track, it feels like, at least for an Alliance raid, feels really mournful. Like there's a little bit of vocals, but not the same way that the DS version used it. And like the volume of piano and vocals there was really, it seems mournful. And if you've played all the way to Endwalker, you might understand why that might be the case now. But here, just like the way that the whirling strings and like sort of like the insistent percussion and like the moments where they go quiet to piano, and like the way, as Jono was talking about earlier, like the way that this track changes consistently from what was originally like a 1 minute MIDI track to this, but also like giving you that like final dungeon feel. And it's not quite the final dungeon, but it mostly is the final dungeon of Final Fantasy 3, and it just feels so propulsive and so intense compared to the other versions that I've heard, and it feels a lot more true to what they're doing in the original version, which I really liked.
Actually, it's funny. I slightly disagree with you, because when I think of the original NES version, I think it sounds like a pretty epic dungeon theme. Like there's a really epic quality, but because it's so short, it drives it straight through. Because obviously, it's just epic. And then with this version, I feel like it starts out much more determined and driven than epic. There's almost militaristic feel with the percussion in the background. But then as the song continues and the horns and the strings really start to come in about a minute into the song, that's when I start getting that more epic feel that is reflected in the original. So I feel like it, like you said, it brings you through a number of different feelings rather than just be one thing in a minute-long loop. Whereas this, it takes you on a bit of a journey, but while still feeling like an incredible end-game, not end-game dungeon.
That's fair. I can see that. Yeah, absolutely.
I think the comparison to the 14 version is good, though, because that one definitely does have less of a triumphant or that feel that you get in this version. So I can see that. And unfortunately, like for making comparisons to the original, like I can't not compare this to 14 as well. So that would have also been my comparison. I'm guessing I have not heard it as much as you in 14. I'm thinking you might be doing that.
I don't know. You haven't played this game for a lot longer than me, but I hope you haven't, honestly.
Well, yeah, but you tend to do roulettes more than me with true. Your mentor status and however many commendations you're up to now.
It's about 1,800, but yeah.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess you've heard it more than me. So I think the other thing too, and I admit I did not listen to the original version to compare on this one. I wish I had, now that we're talking about comparing them, but I'm sure part of it too is just there is so much more breathing room, there's room to add more of that in the Pixel Remasters, because not having that loop, they could really expand on those themes and that sense of adventure in this one.
Yeah, it's a brilliant version. My experience with it has been the DS version as well, mostly, so I like both pieces, but I kind of think I prefer the Pixel Remaster. Just, it's very multi-tiered and just really awesome endgame, not endgame.
But sort of endgame.
Sort of endgame, yeah.
I mean, like the endgame of Final Fantasy 3 is literally the Crystal Tower raids. So, I mean, Labyrinth of the Ancients, Crystal Tower, and World of Darkness. That's not really a spoiler, I promise. So yeah, it was really cool to play 3 after I haven't played 14. So yeah, that was fun.
What I'm hearing is that Final Fantasy 14 is the spiritual sequel to Final Fantasy 3.
I actually think that's probably fair. I think that of all the Final Fantasies it pulls from, it's probably mostly more 3 than anyone, except for maybe 6. I don't know. It's close.
I mean, that's what I've gotten from listening to everyone talk about this game for so many podcasts. Is that, I mean, it like the job system and everything. It really does pull a lot from Final Fantasy 3, and I guess it does too, because rather like it's much like Final Fantasy 3. You know, it's supporting characters that carry the storyline rather than you, like most MMORPGs.
Yeah, that's fair. It's true too.
Oh, Onion Knights.
I'm still waiting for them to add that class to 14.
I think it would look really weird unless you're a Lalafell. It just wouldn't feel right. I mean, you can dress like one now. The hat's in there.
You can.
Yeah,
it is.
All new hires from RPG fans should be called Onion Knights.
Ooh.
until they pass their
probation
3-month probationary period.
Oh,
Then they can choose a class.
I like that.
They get their first job crystal at the 3-month point.
I like it, except that would mean everyone gets hired on and has no direction, and you just have to tell them, it's like, well, go find something to do for 3 months. That might work for some people, but we'll see. So I would like to say I had a tough time picking a song from 6, but I did not. There are a ton of character themes in 6 that I adore. Of course, there's the opera. Of course, there's the final boss theme. If I really wanted to make people suffer and just deliver a ridiculously long episode, the ending theme from 6 is one of my favorite ending theme medleys from any RPG. 16 minutes, I think.
That'd be a problem, because I was tempted to pick Dancing Mad, so we're just gonna play the last 30 minutes of Final Fantasy VI for you.
Yep. So as much as one can argue that something from Final Fantasy VI is underrated, I really feel like, musically anyway, I think this song is one of them. When you see 6 show up in like Distant Worlds, like concerts or other arrangement albums, it's very rare for this song to appear because it's not as popular as some others. But ever since I played the game, what year? 94? So I was 13 when I played this. It's been one of my favorite songs on the album. And I don't know, I guess I'm always surprised that it doesn't show up more often, because it is just, it's like almost like what we talked about with Crystal Tower, this sense of adventure and this determination. And like, I can't ever hear it without thinking of the entire sequence that leads up to it, because I'm trying to decide how much to get into. But, in the second half of the game, you don't have, for a while, you don't have an airship. You don't have this mode of transportation. Like, you're back on foot and like trying to get around this place you ended up in. So, I won't go into the details of how or why, but like when you get into this part and you get this airship back, like for me, it was a huge moment. It's like, oh, well, now like the world is opened up to me again. Like there's so much that you have to do or want to do anyway. Like for me, as much as the second half of the game is non-linear, like I could never play it in a way of like, well, I'll just skip these parts because I do all of it.
Please find a person who plays the game and doesn't do that, because I don't want to be their friend.
I know.
Speaking of searching for friends.
Exactly. So like it's always like hit me as like this major moment, because now you can go wherever you want and do whatever it is you want to do. Go help who you need to help. And I just think I'm really talking about the game and the story, but like that's one of the reasons this song like has always resonated so strongly with me.
It's an apt title too.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to be doing everything.
There are two things this time around that struck me with this song, and I agree. I think this song is fantastic. The whole soundtrack is, of course, but it's particularly the way that like the sound consistently layers as you go, and it always makes me think of like adding, and it's not like anything goes away. Like in a lot of the tracks we've talked about earlier, like it's like the melody gets replaced. I could say it's a flute, which is used very frequently in these tracks, with a piano, with a violin, with, I don't know, rock opera guitar or whatever. And here it's like it starts the flute, then it gets the harp, and then like more orchestral, and like things just keep building and building and building. And it always feels like that seems appropriate to me to what the song is doing, given what you're doing, as Audra was talking about earlier. But I also really like the way that I don't know what the name of this percussion instrument is, and if I'm wrong, please tell me, Jono, because I trust you. But it's something that's like a kabasa, like kind of in the background as you're going, that almost sounds like a train. But it also feels like a wheel might sound. I don't even know how to imitate the sound. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to embarrass myself that badly. Just like the way that it feels like this forward momentum, like with this really interesting instrument. I thought was great. And the way that it moves back and forth with a little bit of jazzy, and like it just, there's so many things happening here in a way that makes like perfect sense. And this track I thought was like, this is what I heard when I played this game originally. Like in my head, this made sense to me.
I don't think I can add much about the orchestration of this version because it's terrific. It takes this orchestration takes the song to some very interesting places when it hits the repeat. I feel like, it's when the strings come in, it feels very epic and sweeping, and the whole world is stretched out before you. But what occurred to me about this song when I was listening to it is it really does stand in contrast almost every other airship theme in every other Final Fantasy game up to this point. Because before this, when you get your airship, you get this theme that like gives you it's a theme of like freedom and exploration and adventure. You can go anywhere. Whereas this theme instead gives you like it's very epic, but it gives you an air of melancholy, which is improvement over the sense of dread that the World of Rune gives you. The overworld theme of the World of Rune, just the bom, 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 bom. And it also gives you like this sense of direction. This is what I feel listening to this song, and not just this version, like every version of this song. It has a sense of direction, like it's heading somewhere, which creates this really weird dichotomy. Because with the airship theme in the World of Balance, the music gives you this sense of freedom, but you're locked into a linear story progression. Whereas in the World of Rune, you have the music gives you a sense of direction, but you're in a non-linear world where you can find your friends in any order you wish. And I just think that's interesting, but that's just how I interpret the feeling of the song.
No, I mean, I like it. I think everyone's had really good insights into this one. I mean, even some stuff I hadn't considered. Like, I like the idea of how the song builds in layers, which the original did a little bit, but not to this extent.
As best it could.
Yeah, exactly. I think the kind of the flute style at the beginning really, it starts off very similar to the original, because like that's a big prevalent instrument in the original version, and it's kind of a good I always liked it because it's almost a throwback to Terra's theme. It's like it's similar to the overworld theme you hear for a good part of the game, but then it goes in its own direction.
It also was a build-up very similar to the overworld theme from Final Fantasy IV. Like it doesn't just jump straight into the theme. It has the dun dun dun.
That's true.
Dun.
Yeah.
Whereas 4 has the so it leads up to both the themes.
See, Zach, Jono did the sounds for you, so you don't have to.
I really appreciate that, Jono. Thank you.
No problem. I'm glad this didn't end in a decisive battle between us about the sounds.
Thank you for that perfect segue. Oh, that's your cue, by the way. So what's your next song, Jono?
Oh, I'm gonna be doing the decisive battle from Final Fantasy VI.
Beautiful. And then, surprisingly, we're actually going to close the show out with Final Fantasy II.
I know, that's a shocker.
I know, but like the song you chose, because of the name of the song, I thought it was a good way of closing out. So what's our last song today, Audra?
It's very fitting. It's Finale from Final Fantasy II Pixel Remaster.
Well, there you go. All right. Let's go listen to the Decisive Battle and then Finale.
Okay, I love a good battle theme, and Final Fantasy is loaded with good battle themes. But in terms of my preference for boss battle themes, I think that Decisive Battle from Final Fantasy VI might be my favorite in the entire series. I just love it. I think it's so epic and intense, and is such the battle themes in Final Fantasy VI are terrific, like the usual battle theme and the just overworld map kind of thing. But like when I hear this, right from the da-na-na-da-na-na-da-na-da, like the second I hear that, I'm like, okay, we're in for a fight, which is what the song should do. In the original version, like I know that the SNES sound card is doing its best to replicate an electric guitar, but not quite. But this version has it's like it's an electric guitar and it's rocking out, whereas other battle themes in previous games are very like orchestral, with some rock influences occasionally. This feels like a flat out rock opera type song. I think the electric guitar is amazing in it. I love the way that the guitar builds tension through the first part of the song, and then that tension is released by the strings coming in on the bridge section. It just releases it and then lets it build again from there. To be honest, I'm always disappointed when Battle to the Death, which is the second boss theme, I think, comes in and basically replaces this one. Because I think Boss to the Death is fine, but I just don't think that it has the same drive. It doesn't get the blood pumping in the same way that this version does. And I mean, there's a lot of the Pixel remasters add a lot musically to Final Fantasy, but I think this song gets one of the biggest payoffs from the actual orchestra or the orchestral version. And now Zach and I will have a decisive battle.
This song did get my blood pumping, but maybe not in the best way. I thought I was having kind of an anxiety attack as I was listening to the song. I just feel like so it goes back to something we were talking about earlier, about how like I heard it a certain way, and maybe it was just like I played this game relatively recently, and like synthesized electric guitar was not the thing that I heard. Like I was like, oh, it's like a swelling violin track, and like to me, that is what I always heard, and I think that has colored my ability to sort of see this. But like when I was listening to it this time, I was like, oh, there's no quiet parts. Oh, it's all just the same motif over and over again. And I felt like, dissimilarly to the earlier tracks we talked about, I felt like it doesn't change much throughout. Like that drum kit like sound kind of just like moves through, the electric guitar kind of moves through. Like it feels very steady in intensity in a way that the others felt steady in intensity, but I feel like they had more movement in terms of like what they were doing with instrumentation or things like that. And I didn't like it because it just felt like, not to quote Amadeus, but it felt like too many notes. And I didn't love this track, but I'm glad you liked it, Jono.
I'm not hurt that you didn't like it. I guess this wasn't a very No, it was decisive. It was decisive in that we both came down and we both agreed to disagree.
Indeed.
Decisive.
I really thought it stayed in my head.
I think it's an interesting discussion because as much as so many of these games did not, or so many things in 6 didn't change a whole lot, it is an interesting take. Like, I don't know that I heard like strings or violins like back in the day when I heard it, but I guess I also didn't really picture rock. But at the same time, I always wonder if like maybe that's what Uematsu was picturing, because it was only a handful of years after 6 came out that he started like putting together the Black Mages, and this was one of the songs on their first album. So maybe that was his intent, and we just never knew at the time. But listening to him back to back, I do like what you pointed out, Zach, is that the original version does have some breathing room. Like there is some more ups and downs, and like I don't know, I think it has a little more variety. Like regardless of what the instrumentation is, like I think I'm okay with the rock sound, but I think I like that it kind of goes down, in and out on the original a little more.
Yeah, this one's more, it builds up.
It's so interesting to me that that you guys have never, you guys weren't hearing electric guitars in the original MIDI version. Like to my ear, even today, like if I listen to it, I'm hearing MIDI electric guitars.
Well, I don't know that I wasn't. I guess I never thought of like, if this was a real instrument, it would be this. But I think it's more the different way that the song is presented is what I catch between the two of them.
I'm not saying that you're wrong. I just am like, wow, I actually genuinely, I'm listening to it. I'm like, I don't know what else it would be. Interesting. I mean, that's the beauty of the 16-bit era.
Tracks, yes.
Yeah,
you got true. It wasn't just the pronunciation of the names that were up to interpretation.
I mean, it's funny because like I don't want that to be like because I actually think something that Mike said is more accurate to what my struggle with this track is, which is I always felt like as soon as I came into the fight in Final Fantasy VI, like it was like it was hitting hard, and then like as I was choosing my actions, it got quieter, and then like as like the rounds were going, it started to build, and then it moved up and down and back and forth, and like I feel like most of the Pixel Remaster tracks are brilliant at doing that, and I feel like this is just like one big like wall of sound. To say something nicer about it than I actually think, and it just didn't work for me, I guess.
I thought it made for a pretty intense boss battle theme, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough.
I still think whether whatever you feel about it, I think it's one of the better battle themes, because I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I don't think Final Fantasy VI's normal battle theme is quite as well regarded as some others in the series. Their boss battle themes are fantastic, though.
Yeah. Again, it's just a matter of, I guess, taste. And in terms of this, I just love the rock feel of it, and I have since the beginning. So it's just a matter of what you go for.
Have you ever played Xenoblade, Jono?
Believe it or not, no.
Okay, well, you absolutely should.
I really should. Yes, I know.
They obviously really like Xenoblade with this track.
That's true. Again, not a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to find someone who likes Xenoblade here, except for maybe Tyler, more than me.
It's interesting how these songs... this is something that's fascinating about Rhythm Encounter in general. There are some songs that just work really, really well in isolation, and there are other songs where you might need the context of the game to really get the full effect. And I'm curious if a battle theme is in that category. Like, I haven't played the Pixel Remaster of Final Fantasy VI yet, but how does this hit if you are in the middle of a boss battle?
Oh, it hits pretty well. I think it really captures the intensity of a fight, kind of a frantic fight, actually.
With ATB, that makes sense. That's cool.
Yes.
Yep.
I think it actually kind of captures ATB quite well.
I'm sure I will play the Pixel Remaster version at some point, don't you worry. So, yeah, maybe I'm wrong.
And you're probably not, though. It's up to interpretation.
Yeah. No one's wrong here. It's funny, though. Like, it's the first song in all of these that we actually had any, like, real debate over. So it's been interesting to talk about.
It's really hard to have a decisive battle when everyone's like, that's a good point.
See? It worked out.
They're all good points, though.
Speaking of decisive moments in video games, there are also finales where you no longer play video games. That was really good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes it sound like we're all gonna die, Zach. What's happening to you in this episode?
I think it just means like, well, I have played Final Fantasy 2, so I'm done with video games now.
That's fair.
You know what else is decisive? A finale.
Yes.
Yes. And it's very fitting for a song that plays during the end credits, which I think this pretty much captures that sense of the journey and epic adventure being over with, kind of, very well. Final Fantasy II is a story about a war, and it's the closing of the war and the resolution of it. And I think it just captured that pretty well in a very sweeping, feeling intensive way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a really beautiful song. I had never heard it before, and I didn't listen to the original, but I like the way that like the lyrical strings come in and the percussion comes in, but it all resolves really tidily and really neatly throughout. Like every time like there's like a swell, it then resolves, and there's a swell and it resolves, and it builds and it resolves, and when the oboe comes in, it resolves, and when like the timpani comes in, it resolves, and like everything, like there's like a resolution to everything in this, and it's a really beautiful track. I was really glad that you brought this on, Audra.
It's probably my favorite track from the game, actually.
Yeah, it's lovely. Like it's really lovely. I enjoyed listening to it a lot. But it just felt like, and there's like a little bit of like formality to it, a little bit like it felt like a little bit of a march underneath some of it. But at the end of the day, like I felt like it all was really tidy, and like it makes sense for an NES Star Wars video game.
Yes.
Which is my impression of Final Fantasy 2.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, I really feel like I maybe shouldn't be like talking too much smack about a game I haven't played yet. I'm just based on what I hear about too. I will say though, like this is actually our second song from Final Fantasy 2. Jono brought one on a while ago, and so far we're doing pretty well because both 2 songs have been just gorgeous.
2 has some good music. I can definitely give it that, if nothing else.
Far be it from me to compliment basically a saga game, but the music in this game is stunning. I actually have very strong memories associated with this theme because it's included on the Final Fantasy Symphonic Suite album from the late 1980s, early 90s, I think. And very, very back in the day when I was like early teenager, this was one of the first Final Fantasy albums I actually listened to. I unfortunately did not buy it. I think I downloaded it on Napster or Kazaa because I was like 12. And I didn't know that you could import things from, Japan. But this is a track on it. And because of that, I loaded it up on, I can't remember if it was my iRiver MP3 player or I had another MP3 player before that had like little discs that you could copy to and put like 10 songs on. You put it into anyway. And I would just like walk around my neighborhood on a nightly walk listening to the Symphonic Suite album. And this was one of my favorite tracks on it. This version, in comparison to that, is very, very similar. That being said, it's a little bit more dynamic. There's some extra instrumentation, including the woodwinds at the beginning, which is absolutely lovely. And there are some changes in tempo throughout the shape the song in a very lovely way. But all in all, I think you're right, Audra. This is a wonderful way to end a epic adventure. It's very peaceful, but it still is driving forward with purpose. There's no tension in this song that really like makes you feel like the worst is still to come or there's another battle ahead. It feels like a finale. Yeah, it's a finale, and it does a really good job of being a finale.
I can't agree more.
Yeah, same here. I should mention, I wasn't sure if you were going to, so I'm going to jump in and mention, and we'll put a link in the show notes too. But if you have not heard episode 54 of Rhythm Encounter, that's when that's when Jono pulled on that song from Symphonic Suite. And that was, just to go back for a minute, but like that was a really interesting discussion because I hadn't realized at the time that they had released this symphonic album at a time when I think it was before Final Fantasy 3 came out. And like that just blew my mind that they were doing some kind of live music like back then in the late 80s. So it was just Final Fantasy 1 and 2, I think, because those are the only Final Fantasies they had. So I definitely recommend that episode as well.
I'm casting my mind back to remember that episode, and I'm just drawing a complete and utter blank because that's how time works now.
I mean, episode 54 was in like late 2019? No, late 2020. Still, it was almost 20 episodes ago.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I looked at our spreadsheet. I didn't remember off the top of my head that it happened to be in episode 54. So don't worry. So, all right. Well, this was a great mix of songs, everyone. I think it's impossible to like really cover like the breadth of the soundtracks to 6 games in a single episode, but I think we touched on some really important highlights. So I appreciate all of you.
The soundtracks are awesome.
Yes, that's true.
And they're available now, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, again, hopefully by the time this publishes, you can just like click links and go to iTunes or Spotify or wherever and just get them. Definitely worth listening to, whether you like and know the originals or not. I mean, Audra, not to single you out, but Audra, and actually everyone who's reviewed the Pixel Remasters for RPG Fan, like, Jono, you had this thing where you wanted people who reviewed the remasters who have not experienced the originals mostly, and I think that was a good call to see like if they still work and resonate with people now.
See through a newcomer's eyes.
Yeah,
there's no way I could have played Final Fantasy IV and not been like, this is the greatest game of all time. So yeah, it was a good call.
Honestly, I just wanted an excuse to make Audra play Final Fantasy 6.
Aw. And I am grateful for it, because that was an awesome game.
Yeah, Zach, what you would have reviewed for, and be like, Zach, you can't really give every category at 100.
It's fair.
It deserves
It's like if you let me review Suikoden 2, yes.
Yeah. It would be as like imbalanced and an overly high score as like Mike Salbato's review of Skyward Sword.
Yeah, I've read that. It's a good review, Mike.
I mean, okay. I hope it's a good review. It's been so long since I wrote it, but I'm pretty sure I gave it a 98, which is ridiculous. I just really liked it.
When I was moving things over to our current site, I read it and I was like, this is a good review for a review score I don't agree with.
Okay. All right. That's fair. I don't know if I would agree with it
battle.
in hindsight.
Another decisive battle.
I might give that score to the HD one because it fixes some of the things that are really wrong with it, but that's another discussion. Yeah. So again, thank you all. This has been a good episode, even though we have a not so secret bonus track coming up later. But before we get to that, let's talk about what's coming next. So coming up next on Rhythm Encounter is Final Fantasy 13. That's an episode we've been talking about getting together for a long time. And since Final Fantasy 13 is 3 games, there's a lot of music to draw on. So I'm excited for that one. I think it's going to be a good lineup. We have 4 people on that one, so please look forward to that one in a couple of weeks. We are not talking about what's coming after that just yet. We have some surprises lined up. I will say, to tease a little bit in advance here, that we do have an episode coming up in June to celebrate the anniversary of a game that's very, very important to RPG fan history. So that's the only clue I'm going to give you, but I'm very much looking forward to that. That'll come out in late June. So I can tell you that much for now. When we get closer, we'll talk about it a little more. But we have some good ideas coming up. So if you have ideas for future shows, or if you want to just share feedback on this or any other episode, you can email us at music@rpgfan.com. Remember that if you're listening either on the website or your podcast player, there is either a track list. There's a track list and other links to albums where you can listen to these albums and possibly buy them if the links work. So please be on the lookout for that. If you want to contact me personally outside of the show, you can reach me at mike@rpgfan.com. What's the best way for people to reach you, Jono?
You can find me on the site at jlogan@rpgfan.com. You can find me on Twitter at Jono_Logan, or if you have something for Random Encounter, you can send it to podcast@rpgfan.com.
Beautiful. How about you, Audra?
Audra B@rpgfan.com. And I am Twitterless at the moment.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, good for you.
No tweets. Tweetless.
How about you, Zach? What's the best way for people to reach you?
The best way is probably emailing me at zachw@rpgfan.com. You can also find me on our Discord at zachw.
Perfect. Yeah, so again, drop us a message if you want. If you're not familiar with RPG Fan's other shows, be sure to also check out Random Encounter, which is our general and current... why am I introducing it, Jono? You should introduce Random Encounter.
Yeah, we talk about games that are coming out right now, games that have come out recently. We talk about recent news, basically anything that floats into my head at the time.
That works.
Well, sometimes it does, yeah.
Yes. I think more often than not it does, so don't worry.
Fingers crossed.
So along with Random Encounter, we also have Retro Encounter that posts every Thursday, and that is about retro games, which involves a game journal every month about a couple episodes playing through an older game, and then some other fun episodes in between. So be sure to check them out every Thursday. What is it, 357? I always get my numbers off because I know what's coming up and I forget what has posted.
Recently, 328, I think, was Super Metroid.
You're right. Why did I think it was? Okay.
I don't know, but it was a great episode. It was so much fun to do.
It was. Yes.
Yeah, talking about the classic RPG, Super Metroid.
I mean, it's one of my favorites.
Ah, yes. So many roles you can play.
If you enjoyed this show or any of our other shows, we would love it if you could review, subscribe, et cetera, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever it is you're listening. That means a lot to us. So I think that's all of our housekeeping. So we have a bonus track now, and I'm pretty sure I know where our person ended up. So who has a bonus track and what are we closing out on?
Okay. Yeah. Well, we were talking about this for a while, and we were talking about what we want to close the episode out with and what would be the best. And we thought, oh, the opera. But then the opera is basically just Celes' theme. Let's go for something else. And we realized if we're going to close it out, we've got to go with the Chocobo theme. It's necessary. It just needs to be a Chocobo theme. So I was like, what is the quintessential Chocobo theme? And I listened to all of them, and I was like, you know what? In my mind, because again, it's my first RPG, the Chocobo theme that defined Chocobos in my mind was Final Fantasy IV. So we're going to be listening to Samba de Chocobo as closing out tonight.
I love it.
Awesome.
I don't really think you can go wrong with any of them. So I always would have said I love it, but good choice.
Na, 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 na.
Oh man, it's like we're doing a karaoke episode.
That would be great. A karaoke Chocobo episode. Let's do it.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank all of you for being here. Thank you everyone for listening. Let's go listen to Samba de Chocobo, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. I keep trying to mute before my cat makes noise.
Oh, I haven't even heard your cat.
I've heard it a few times, but it's totally fine. Your cat rarely shows up when I do a remove silence pass, and when the cat does, the cat usually ends up in the bloopers. So, yes, so much to say about Final Fantasy. Wow.